my delicious little donut. This is TK from the future. Before recording this episode, to pop in to let you know that there will be a special announcement at the end of the episode. So stay tuned. Okay, enjoy. See you later. Love you. Bye. Welcome, friend. I'm TK, your tour guide to the past, and you are listening to For the Love of History, the podcast where we talk about world history, women's history, weird history, and makeup history, because today we have a wonderful guest, an art/fashion historian, a fellow internet edutainer. We have Laura Fitzgerald here on the podcast today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. Delighted to be here.
Thank you. I'm so glad you made time for us. It's super early in the morning for Laura right now. That wonderful time difference. So Laura and I actually not hooked up. That's a weird word to say, Taya.
It doesn't mean the same thing in Ireland.
Perfect. So
It's an American
understand
thing.
that in the Irish way. So we came across each other on Instagram. I don't know who followed who first, but we've been following each other for quite some time now and decided finally we got together to make a podcast episode. And I'm so excited about it. So Laura, can you tell us how you got started in your art and fashion career?
Of course. Well, first of all, thank you so much for asking me. And I will say it was over orange eyeshadow that we did bond, but it's been a few years now we've been following each other. So thank you for that. In a way, I mean, I've got 2 degrees. I've got one.
Mhm.
My bachelor's was in art history and history. My master's was in art history. So I think I've always had that massive background, I suppose, in history itself. But when I was studying both, I always tried to couple art with social history. And particularly when I was studying history, I was very, very interested in what we wore, how we presented ourselves through time. Now, I focused mainly, of course, on art, ended up doing it for my master's. And during my thesis, I was looking at medieval metalwork. So in particular, body part reliquary shrines, so pieces of saints.
What?
Okay. I always remember when I was compiling like the appendices for my MA, and I had all the images on the table. My mother, I was living at home at the time, and she was like, if anybody broke into this house, she said, look at what's on the table. It was like, a piece of an arm, a piece of a leg, a bit of a head, a bit of a, it was all saint body part reliquary shrines dotted all around the table. And she was like, if anybody broke in, they would think they'd leave. They'd think we're mad. I was like,
It's the perfect security system. Just reliquary body parts. Love it.
just put your weird history stuff on display and they'll just walk in. They'll go, maybe not this one. And they'll walk back in. So it's a good fail. Actually, no, history saves lives.
Yeah.
But I was quite obsessed with the metal casings that they created, particularly later, so 12th century onwards. And these really ornate casings to kind of venerate these saints within, that they were saying were within these shrines.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just found the whole concept quite fascinating and looked at medieval metalwork in conjunction with mass movement across Europe at the time. So always trying to balance both. And from there, I ended up in the National Museum of Ireland. And then I ended up working in different museums all across Ireland. And then finally, I'm out on my own as a historian. So I could go back, but I love it. Oh, I'm so busy. It's great.
Yeah.
However, and this is where the double life part comes in.
Yeah.
I always worked in fashion. So throughout college to, just to get through university, I always worked as a stylist. I worked in retail. So I always had that background in fashion throughout. And I was trying to combine the two. Realized very quickly there probably isn't a world where the two can coexist until now, and was like, okay, or maybe there can be. But it was really funny. Like my day job or my day internship was working on Vikings. It was working in the Natural History Museum. Then I was running off to a fashion event in the evening.
So cool.
I had this double life, weirdly. So to put them all together was something that I've always wanted and strived to do.
Yeah.
Didn't think there was an audience for it. Didn't think there was an appetite for it. Then I started making content.
Yeah.
And that's where everybody has started to see where these two worlds collide. It's been so beautifully received and everybody loves it. So I can't believe it. There is a world out there where the two can exist. Which is great.
There is. I can't remember who said it. If I remember editing TK, we'll put it somewhere. But there's a person who said that jobs of the future are created by you. So we make jobs that we want for ourselves. And that's like the next evolution of jobs, which you're ahead of the curve already, Laura. You're awesome. You're killing it.
Thank you. I mean, like I'm presenting loads of new research this year, which is really exciting.
That's
But
awesome.
yeah, it's great. I've always kept one foot in academia despite working in the museum sector, because sometimes you can leave academia a little bit when you're working in the field so much.
Yeah.
So it was nice to always keep one foot and keep. Obviously, I'm listed as like independent researcher.
Yeah.
These conference papers, but it's great to be able to still be accepted into the academic world, which I've always kept one foot in anyway, and still research. So I'm always torn between providing this information, still being a publishing and a research and academic, and wear loads of makeup.
Exactly. You can be an octopus and have multiple feet in different places.
Yeah. Everybody was like, niche down. I was like, no.
No, get out of here. You can do it all. Laura's love of art and fashion and makeup led her to create a series that I'm absolutely obsessed. I love it. And if you're watching the video version, you can see Laura's gorgeous sapphire eyeshadow and my attempt at an emerald. We're trying, we're doing it.
It's gorgeous. It's gorgeous.
So what made you become so interested in makeup history in the first place?
Yeah, I think it's just because art and fashion in particular are forms of expression. They coexist, and that kind of passion for it was always there because of my background and my experience. But also, and I think what's nice, particularly with the gem series, I know you're really excited to talk more about those gemstones themselves, but the makeup history and cosmetic history in particular is born out of beauty history. And beauty history is something that's quite overlooked. It's deemed usually as frivolous. It's deemed usually as it's a nice little field, but it's not something that we're taking too seriously. But I think now there is a value put onto how important and just how widespread the beauty industry is, and the beauty industry that comes with it. And there has been a background of that since there's been a history of that since ancient Egypt in particular is kind of where you start, or as well. We'll be talking about that a little bit later when it comes to if you like. I'm sure you're excited for. But with the gemstones, it was really a harp back to 12th century metalwork, which is obviously where I had started off in, and in particular venerating these shrines and these beautiful metal casings. So I was looking at precious gemstones because I was quite interested in the ingredients of cosmetics and in beauty products. And so we have crushed up rubies in a lot of products. So where did that come from?
Yeah.
But the interest in fashion was always there. It was always such a passion. So now, as I said, I'm merging them all together.
You're making your own job, and I absolutely love that you're doing that. So to talk a little bit about what got us wanting to do this episode in the first place is Laura has this incredible series that she's doing on the Instagram and the TikTok all about these gems and how they're used in medicinal ways, but also used in makeup. The word that you use for it is what? I forgot. Precious treatments. That's what it is. So these precious treatments. So I'd love for you to tell us more about these precious treatments.
Of course. Yeah. I mean, it was born out of, I was really inspired by Pat McGraw's Sapphire Blitz. I should have. Yeah. When I saw it, I was like, well, I know loads about sapphires and eyes. I wonder if I can merge the two together. And it worked. But when it comes to gemstones, and particularly why I called it precious treatments, was even though these minerals, which we've just talked about, when they're faceted, that's when they become gemstones. They were always deemed as quite precious materials. They are quite hard to come by. They, obviously the more I suppose the harder it is to find these particular products, then the more coveted they're going to be. So the
Yeah.
like diamonds, emeralds, rubies are a bit more, you can find them a bit quicker. Same with topaz, they come in different colors. That's the impurity in the topaz that makes that color. But what I was really fascinated was the history behind the curative powers or properties of these gemstones. You find it a lot now. Crystals are everywhere now, and I like an L crystal myself. I really
I'm a
do.
crystal girly. I'm looking
I'm a
at my.
crystal girl.
I got mine over there.
Yeah, I have a little stand. I love my crystals too. So there's a huge influx, or maybe I suppose a greater movement towards coveting and looking at these crystals, and it's everywhere. You know, it's all over TikTok. It's all over Instagram. There's a huge movement now in looking at crystals and using them in people's day-to-day lives. But I was like, it's been around for a while. So actually, you'll find. So I mean, historically, with gemstones, it can range from everything. I did list a couple for you today. So, you know, the likes of bloodstone, sapphire, ruby, emerald, topaz, diamond. That's the kind of the top 6, 5, 6 that I would probably look if I was to sit down in the pub and tell you about these gemstones. They're the ones that I would pick. But really, you find it from at least the 3rd century BCE being mentioned in records, particularly in the 1st century. We've got Pliny the Elder. And you find that it's kind of sparsely or sporadically mentioned in records. But then you hit the medieval period, and these gemstones within and their curative properties takes off.
Wow.
And that continues right up into the later Middle Ages. And we have, you know, the likes of lithotherapy to thank for that.
Ooh, could you tell us what is lithotherapy?
Absolutely. So lithotherapy or lithotherapy depends who you're talking to. I say litho as in like lithograph, or like, you know, the belief, what it is the belief in the magical or amuletic and healing effects of precious stones. And this was formed, as I mentioned, from the classical period and continued right through to the later Middle Ages. And that's why when I'm talking to you later about some of the weird and wonderful gemstones and their uses, I will flit from Pliny to the likes of Albertus Magnus, who was this medieval philosopher. So it was also administered, though, in addition to surgery. So the likes of leeching or cupping or bleeding would take place. I'm sure you've covered it before or mentioned it before.
Well, I'm sure we've talked about leeching before.
But like, yeah, I wouldn't expect you not to have, to be honest with you.
Weird medical thing. We love that here.
But even like a lithotherapy would have been used in addition to like the likes of tinctures. So, you know, anything that would have had, you know, treatments with drugs inside either alcohol or any kind of liquid. And then other methods of healing, so forms of belief and faith in particular. There was this huge crossover, particularly from the medieval period, between the church and lithotherapy. And that's why lithotherapy is often called a clerical obsession with using gemstones to alleviate illness or for the remedies. So predominantly then, as I said, in the medieval and later Middle Ages.
Wow, that's so interesting. I'd love to like dive in more to each specific gem. Well, as many as we can talk about. We can't talk about every single gemstone, but yeah. Well, since you know your look is inspired by sapphires today, why don't we take a look at the medicinal purposes of sapphire or how they were used?
Of course. So you'll probably notice that when I'm talking today, I'm really staying within the 12th to 16th century mark. And that's quite interesting because it actually crossed over a lot with medieval reliquary shrines, and the metal encasings, they really do date from the 12th to the 16th century as well. So adding precious stones or a greater interest in precious stones, the overlap between them and the church. So for example, which leads me on beautifully. So I've got crystals on my fingers, so if you hear them clicking, then it's ASMR. If you
it's free lithography.
Free lithography or lithographical ASMR for your listeners.
Exactly. We're healing your eardrums right now.
You're welcome. But in 1391, to be specific, in St. Paul's in London, there was a one, Richard Preston, and he offered a sapphire to the shrine of Saint Erkenwald. So again, we have shrines, we have medieval veneration of saints, and here entered the sapphire. And
Nice.
what he wanted was to offer this stone to be kept in St. Paul's as a cure for diseases of the eyes.
Okay.
And this kind of alleged usefulness of a sapphire for the eyes as a remedy, that was actually proclaimed by Albertus Magnus. Now, there is a fantastic painting of him in the Metz collection by Frederick Walther. And Magnus and you can see him giving a sermon, doing the whole spiel. And he was a medieval philosopher, theologian from about 1193 to about 1280. So we're in that kind of 12th to 13th century marker. By the 14th century, they're still bringing sapphires into these religious spaces because of the work of Magnus. So some of his work, when you're reading it, I mean, it's not entirely free from superstition. You know, there's some of it isn't too far off. A lot of later sources amplify what he's saying about the curative power of gemstones.
Okay.
And Magnus claimed that the sapphire removed all impurities or foreign bodies from the eye. And what's interesting, and why I particularly look at him with sapphires, he claims to have seen this happen in front of him. He's watched this happen and seen the sapphire do this. So he said that a sapphire was allegedly dipped in cold water before being used directly on the eye to remove impurities. So not for a nice cooling sensation, but actually to stop the contagious eye infection from spreading.
Wow.
That same sapphire would have been used for everybody else who needed it. Nice. But even in the Charles V, the Holy Roman Emperor, there in the mid 16th century, if you want exact dates, it's 1519 to 1556 off the top of my head. This is good for early morning in Ireland, so
Right? This is like brain training.
Proud of myself now. That won't happen again. But he talks of an oval oriental sapphire for touching the eye. And again, it's to remove, it was specifically in his inventory as Holy Roman Emperor to have a sapphire there for the eye, for touching the eye. And that, as I said, so we're getting that from the 12th century right up until the 16th century, using sapphires to remove gunk from your eye.
From the eyeball? Oh my gosh. That's so interesting. I mean, they're not wrong. You could use anything to scrape gunk out of your eyeball, but that's so interesting that it lasted this use of sapphires in the eyes lasted for such a long time. That's crazy. That's so interesting.
You find it with a lot when you're reading through the lore of all these gemstones, just how many centuries. Now, obviously some sources there's not as many to compete with. Some sources are quite easy to use as a base and later amplify because there might not be as much written down. So, Magnus might have been the only fella around for a while who's talking about this in his manuscript. So it's just used as the base. It's used as the control, and then people can go back and visit it and revisit it. And this, you find this a lot with sources over the years.
Yeah.
But what's really interesting sometimes when you're looking at the history of gemstones is how the same uses are across the world. So that's what I find fascinating.
Wow. So the sapphire was used not only, by this Magnus fella, but all the way across the world as well.
Particularly because it was referred to as an oriental sapphire. So there's definitely some link between either the sapphire came from somewhere in the east and was already either then the use of it for the eyes was applied to it, or was already known as being used for the eye somewhere else, over in the east, which is so big. Doesn't make any sense.
I know. Where are we talking about, guys? Magnus, I need you to be a little bit more specific, please.
And you'll find that they rarely are, but
much to our chagrin, I guess. But that's so interesting about the sapphire. And there seems to be more gems that have to do with eyes as well. In your series, you also mentioned that emeralds have been used for curative things for eyes as well. Could you tell us a little bit more about emeralds?
Oh, of course, absolutely. And also then just I suppose to kind of chime in there
Yeah.
about the chagrin, which I completely, feel most of the time. But that's the role of us as researchers, that's the role of us as historians, is to create a bigger picture then from all of the information that we can gather, that we can muster.
Exactly.
And I'm
Yeah.
quite interdisciplinary about my work. Like I'm a cosmetic historian, a fashion historian, a beauty historian, and an art historian. They
Yeah.
always overlap. I'm never too far out of each cavern, but it's or out of each topic, I suppose. But that's where you find all the information when you grab sources from everywhere. Look at it as a whole, as a big
Exactly. Yeah. Whole picture history instead of like, this happened in this little vacuum or this little vacuum.
On the topic of emeralds that you just mentioned, absolutely. And actually that brings in the point that we already made as well about different parts of the world also coming up with the same curative properties for these gemstones. And obviously we know that we should take it all with a pinch of salt, and modern medicine has changed everything. But just the discussion around it is interesting in and of itself. Emeralds in particular were used for eye strain, or as a remedy for eye strain, so to do with the dimness of vision. And topaz is the same, which if you want me to get to later, I can. We'll be here all day. But
I want all the information.
But as far back as the 3rd century BCE, you have noted, or it has been noted, that emeralds were used to relieve the eye. And they were also used as an antidote for poison or poisonous wounds. But by the 16th century, what emeralds were most known for was actually a cure for dysentery. And if you wore an emerald around your neck or suspended it so that it suspended and touched your abdomen while another was in your mouth, then it was an effective cure for dysentery. Now, this was used by or employed by a Spanish physician called Pascali, and he used it on very famously on a one Juan de Mendoza, who was a Spanish nobleman, and he was cured by emeralds, allegedly, and he became an advisor to the King of Spain. But you also have then, around the same time, over in Württemberg, a man called Wolfgang Gabelkover, who noted that he used emeralds to cure dysentery as well. So are they talking to each other? Are they come up with use for emeralds by themselves? There doesn't seem to be a crossover in their sources, as much as I can find. But if someone does find it, please let me know. As for what I could find, they seem to be kind of going on their own. And he said that it has invariable success. So it's working every single time.
He is a confident man.
He's like, this is always working for me. And it was actually, but if to look back at eyes, then Pliny the Elder was noted for mentioning or noting that emeralds, when he was writing in the 1st century, there was no green that was greener. He mentioned nothing green's greener.
The green was really greening.
The green was so greening. But
so green.
I mean, like it is fascinating because when you're looking between the 12th and 16th century, you have the invention, of course, of the printing press.
Yeah.
And one of the very first ancient texts that was printed would have been Pliny the Elder. So again, you've got this resurgence or a renewal in the interest of the curative powers of gemstones, whilst you have the printing of these ancient texts which mention it in the first place. So 1469 is the year that Pliny the Elder's work is printed. It's also around the same time emeralds are coming back into use again. So there has to be some kind of association.
Some sort of connection there. Yeah. That's so interesting. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, like Pliny, he was the one that noted that the emerald much delighted the eye, as he mentioned, without fatiguing
it. Yeah.
Without fatiguing it. So that's when, of course, vision being wearied by looking upon other things, that your vision gained renewed strength by looking on an emerald.
Wow.
And what I find fascinating, and I hope any gem carvers, gemologists out there, if anyone's listening, can back this up, but there is this myth that apparently gem carvers kept emeralds on their workbenches. So when they were looking and they were working on a diamond or a ruby or a sapphire all day, that when their eyes grew tired, they would go and look at some emeralds to bring their vision back, rejuvenate their eyes. I just wonder if that's like a little superstition that maybe gemologists still have today. They still, the way like perfumers keep coffee beans to smell.
Yeah, on their table.
Exactly.
And
there might be
some connection with that. And I wonder, sorry to interrupt you, if that has anything to do with those lamps, those emerald colored desk lamps.
That's what I thought. I really looked into it. I remember I called, because the National didn't call. I called into them, but the National Library of Ireland has those beautiful emerald desk lamps in the reading rooms, and I was like, I wonder if that's the reason why. Is it better for focus? Is it a way for us to renew our vision so we can look at emeralds and go, okay, and go back on track? So if you're ever stuck, dear listeners, and your eyes are weary, go look at something green. Preferably an emerald.
If you've got one handy.
I don't, but I'm sure.
Yeah, no, neither do I. I wish. So you were talking about, what was it? Topaz, you said? No, Topaz, right?
Yeah.
So Topaz was also used for the eye, or was it used for other things as well?
Yep. So the topaz itself would have been used again for eyes, and it was quite similarly used like sapphires were. So very, very similar in the same vein. I don't know if you've ever heard of Hildegard of Bingen. Saint Hildegard of Bingen lived in a closed monastery. She was a Benedictine abbess.
Okay.
Very close to her library, very close to her garden. But on top of all of that, she was also a writer, composer, philosopher, practitioner. And during some of the manuscripts that were written from her work, she would dictate to the people who were drawing the little pictures of her or little depictions of her in manuscripts. There's one, I think it's 1151 Scivias is the manuscript. And this all falls into what I was studying back in the day, but you can see her. I'll send you the photo if you want.
Yes.
Just for the listeners, if they want something to imagine. So she's receiving a prophecy. She's receiving it into her mind, and it's coming out of her onto the page. And the person who's drawing it, she would apparently stand over them and kind of watch them to make sure they were doing it perfectly.
They're doing it right.
That's
micromanaging.
Yeah. She'd be like, that is me receiving the vision, and this is me dictating to you then what I've received from the divine intervention. And it was brilliant. I mean, like, she was a bit micromanaging, I think. She was a woman of many skills, and you can see her work really coming together, particularly by the 12th century, because she was born in 1098, so very, very late into the 11th. So again, 12th century, again, starting to write manuscripts, but focusing on health curative properties. So she's got two major works that comes out, Causae et Curae and Physica. So Physica is the one you want to read. 9 books in total. Maybe not all of it. But in it, she talks about the curative properties of precious stones. And in particular, topaz. And in particular, how it was used to cure dimness of vision. So again, the fatigued vision, that could be anything from the fact that glasses have not been invented yet to eye strain, but probably the former. So she claimed that with a topaz, it was to be kept in wine for 3 days and 3 nights before bed. And then the patient would use the moistened topaz, so the wine-soaked topaz, to rub onto their eye very lightly to get rid of all the gunk in their eye. So after the stone was removed, she does claim that the wine could be used for 5 days. I don't know how. I don't know if it's an eye wash or whether you drank it.
Yeah. Because I'm wondering, like, do you take the topaz out and then you rub your eye and then you put it back in? Because
the stone, once it's out. Like the curative properties have been put into the wine from the stone.
Okay, great. Because I was like, if you're just like rubbing your gunky eye and then putting it back in the wine, please don't drink that. Please.
I know. I say the topaz was given to somebody else or passed on to whoever else had the
washed, hopefully,
and then the wine could be used. She just says used for the next 5 days. So
big. So scary. Ominously vague.
I would say it was drank, but then you've already put the wine onto your eye, so maybe yeah, well,
Yeah.
that requires more research, as my lecturers would always say. That requires more research.
More research. Okay. Thanks, Hildegard. That is so weird, but so cool. As much as of history is,
Mm.
just random stuff. Like,
I mean, the reason I bring these up is because these manuscripts were referred back to. They were used as medical handbooks, textbooks. Hildegard was a practitioner as well.
Mhm.
So like these were used as medical books, as your handbook for.
Yeah,
I've got something in my eye. Let's go and have a look and see what the cure is.
in the book
And
and see, yeah.
I mean, like, topazes don't go anywhere. By the 15th century, you have Italian physicians allegedly using them to cure plague sores, and that continues, through the 15th century. So, I mean, the topaz itself, again, like emerald, like sapphire, to do with the eye, but
Mhm.
I think again, it's this obsession with lithotherapy, and
Yeah.
particularly the clerical obsession with it. And
Yeah.
I mean, if you're looking at medieval reliquary shrines and you're looking at these gemstones by using the most coveted materials, then that
Mm.
obviously, bolsters your work as the church. So,
Yeah.
you're using the most precious materials, which is why when you walk into Catholic treasuries, they are so beautifully ordained. It's all inspiring.
Yeah.
It's meant to be something that is intangible and that
Mhm.
is miraculous. So
Yeah.
makes sense.
I mean, the Catholic Church is, I think it's the Catholicism is the drag of all religions. I feel like, like
Oh my god, I love it. It's
if you're,
so flashy, in fairness.
it's
Like,
so
slay.
flashy. Have you seen the Pope? Have you seen that man?
I have seen Rihanna's version of the Pope dress with my because I went to that exhibition. I went to Heavenly Bodies. I
Mm.
had to go. I mean, I had to. It was just so fabulous because you had reliquary shrines, which I had like, listed in my bloody bibliography next to an Alexander McQueen bodice, or like a Dior silk taffeta dress. And I'm like, this is the best moment of
Right?
my life.
But I do just want to point out that you came before the Heavenly Bodies exhibit. So I would like to give you credit as the person to bring these two worlds together.
Anna stole it from me. No, I just
How dare
Anna
they?
Wintour, if you're listening, I dare you. No, I'm joking.
Anna Wintour, if you're listening, please invite us to the next Met Gala.
Please, because it's Sleeping Beauties. So I really want to go. I really want. Well, I'm gonna
Mm.
really try my hardest to get over. It's just trying to find the time in the day to
Yeah.
take a week to go to America. But I really want to go and see the Sleeping Beauties exhibition, because that's all archival pieces of fashion now that will be on display, and it'll be beautiful. And I can't wait.
Manifest. We're manifesting it. We are going to get invited
If any
somehow.
listeners want to send me and TK to
Yes.
we will do the best content for. We will make it so fabulous.
Yes. You'll feel like you're there with us in the Met Gala.
There's so many topazes for me to show, TK, and
So
so
many.
please let me.
Let us have a history BFF.
Well, we can go to the cloisters and do some precious treatment series, and then we can go and have a look at the fashion, and yeah, it'll be great. I mean, maybe
Exactly.
this is we're gonna manifest it from. Where's your crystals? Quick.
I know. I gotta go get my crystals. Laura and I need some rubies no, not rubies, emeralds to soothe our strained eyes from doing so much research. So
Exactly. But I'm glad you mentioned rubies. I don't know if you want me to talk about rubies, but I can.
I would love to talk about rubies. Yes. Why don't we make that our final gemstone that we talk about for medicinal purposes? And then after that, let's move on to the makeup. Does that sound good to you?
That's absolutely no problem at all. And
Okay.
also, I was going to bring up diamonds for you, but I think with diamonds, they're not really there is a lot of uses for them, but they seem to be so coveted because they
Mhm.
are like the gemstone, and they always have been. So
Yeah.
I just find the ones that are like rubies, sapphires, emeralds, they tend to be used a lot more in specific cures rather than, because diamonds are just like, oh, they're so gorgeous, they're really kind of like kept for the worst possible scenario, you know.
Okay. They're like this emergency gem.
Like, nothing's working, we need a diamond. That happened with Pope Clement VII. He was like, he was dying, and they crushed up so like 3,000. I think it was, no, sorry, it was 40 carats of precious stones a dose they were giving him when he was dying in 1534.
Oh
But
my God.
one single dose would cost up to 3,000 ducats. So they just reverted. They even tried to use, and like diamonds are very hard to crush anyway. So
Yeah.
as you well know.
Oh my
But
gosh. That's crazy.
but for rubies though, I
Yeah.
promise it's the last one. I promise.
No, I love it.
There was a physician in Kashmir, which is right on the border between modern day Pakistan and India. Quick geography side note.
Thank you.
And in case you're wondering, but in the 13th century, there was a physician called Naharari, which I'm probably butchering with my Irish accent, and I do apologize. He ground rubies into a very fine powder to be placed on the tongue as a remedy for, and wait for it, flatulence and biliousness. I think that might be my favorite.
That's hilarious. Oh, I got the bubble guts. I need some rubies.
Exactly, yeah. Now, obviously, biliousness is an 18th, 19th century term that's much later. It was obviously referring to, in the 13th century, one of the four humors of the body. So, which I'm sure you've mentioned: phlegm, blood, black bile, and yellow bile.
Yeah. We talked about we've talked about that before, but why don't you explain biliousness a little bit for our listeners?
Yeah, so biliousness would just be anything to do with one of the biles of those four humors, so either black bile or yellow bile. I mean, these excesses of these four humors then were tried to be purged from your body, so with bleeding, cupping, leaching. And I think if you're looking at biliousness with flatulence, you can probably guess which bodily fluid I may be referring to. And especially with the background of some precious stones being used with dysentery, yeah, you can probably guess which yellow bile or black bile I may be referring to.
Yeah. Gross.
Nice. Now, obviously, they have their own definition in 13th century, but because they were writing about what Naharari was doing in the 13th century, they were applying 18th and 19th century meanings or definitions to it. So I would probably focus more on the flatulence element of it and look at it the way they were using emeralds to cure dysentery, using crushed rubies for anything in the gut related field.
Yeah, I'm sure all the IBS girls know exactly what that is, with the hurt tummies.
Yeah, I mean, if anybody wants to know more about rubies, though, I mean, they are a fascinating gemstone. They've got a great history. There's a fantastic book called Fire and Blood about the myths and lore of rubies by Diane Morgan, which I encourage you to read.
Oh, okay. I will put that in the show notes, by Diane Morgan. Cool. Love it. So we have all of these gems used for hundreds, if not like thousands of years, to cure things.
Yes.
Eyes, little bubble guts, but it's also used in makeup as well. And I would love to know, in what way were these gems used for makeup?
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to the cosmetic uses of gemstones, really you're only looking at the likes of malachite or galena. Now, I would never really include galena because that's lead based. It's what we call the coal mineral, not really seen as a gemstone, but malachite certainly was. And you'll find it's extract still in products today. And I have a little list of products for the end of the show to tell you about, which still includes rubies, gemstones. So I have them all, which are still using them. So they kind of got renewed again in the 20th and 21st century, this interest. And particularly in crystals, particularly in precious gemstones. So you do find it a lot in skincare. But malachite, because it's a copper carbonate hydroxide mineral for the full, because it's copper based, it has a beautiful green color to it. And it's used now for soothing and calming the skin, like the way you would use anything kind of green on red to calm the skin. Detoxifying, but it's also found as a coloring for cosmetics, and that is nothing new. Cosmetic palettes in ancient Egypt, in particular, would have ground down malachite into a powder
Oh, wow.
to then be applied across the eyelids. So, like modern day eyeshadow. When it's ground down, you've got this beautiful mint color to it, depending on which product you put with it. So, whether that's gum, water, or animal fat, it just changes to slightly different shades of teal and aquamarine.
So cool.
Gorgeous. So, some malachite containers date to between 2000 and 500 BCE, but they're the containers that would hold the crushed malachite. Also find, and what I have seen in real life when I went to the Museo Egizio in Torino, in Turin, in Italy,
Ooh.
is the earliest palettes that I've ever seen are dating to about 3900 to 3000, or
Wow.
BCE, as I say. That's caused a lot of fun conversations online.
Yeah, I know. Same. I've had those conversations too.
Oh well, I use BCE. I'm an academic, sorry.
That's
But,
fine.
but 3900 to 3000 BCE. So that means that you have cosmetic palettes the same time as the Neolithic period. So we're talking Stone Age cosmetic palettes, if you want it
Oh
in
my
layman's terms.
gosh. Are you telling me? I know this is not an accurate term, but we have caveman makeup palettes.
In the most layman of layman terms, but we do have there is evidence of some cosmetic palettes dating to 5000 BCE, which is only 1,000 years before the ones I saw. So I still saw some old ones, okay?
That's incredible.
But they were always geometric in shape. They were rectangular. And I don't know whether that was to really kind of reinforce the fact that they were used as almost these palettes were made of mudstone or siltstone, but mainly mudstone. It's a very sedimentary rock
Mhm.
and made of mud clay. So they were quite almost like a slate-like in the way they're
Yeah.
formed. They're not
Yeah.
slate, obviously, but they look like a slate. Originally, they were geometric patterns, but then throughout the millennia at this stage, you
Yeah.
see them become zoomorphic, so animal shaped in their design. Yeah.
Stop. That is so cool.
So originally they're rectangular, they're circular, they're geometric, but later on they become bird shaped or lizard, well, almost like a reptilian shaped. They become quite personal then to whoever is using
Oh
these
my
cosmetic
gosh.
palettes.
That is so cool because now, like, you're seeing like this resurgence of really cool shaped palettes coming out right now. Like with one of my particular favorite brands, Flower Nose. It's a sea beauty brand, a Chinese beauty brand, and they have some incredibly shaped palettes. So that's really cool. They're just so
Yeah, it is. I mean, like I'm a like a beauty historian, and cosmetic history is my jam. So I got extreme. I was over there to watch the Eurovision. I was attending the Eurovision Song
uh-huh.
Contest. Another great love of mine. We went into the Museo Egizio. We spent about 4 hours in there, and I was just fawning over these cosmetic palettes. Now they're not palettes in the way they wouldn't contain the the makeup, the cosmetic, or the
Mhm.
pigment essentially is what it was. If you
Yeah.
were looking at it if I'm using makeup terms today,
Mhm.
the pigment was not kept in the palettes. The palettes were used to ground down the pigment.
Oh my gosh. So it's like the modern day, I don't know if anybody has seen this, but those metal palettes that a lot of makeup artists use to create their own shades and mixtures and things like that. So it's just like cooler versions of that. What?
That's exactly what it is. And if you look at like the likes of Meron using a gum like liquid to mix with your pigment to create an eyeshadow, like really nothing's that is, you know,
What they
3,000,
did.
5,000, 4,000 years old. Because with the malachite, when it was ground down, then there is a theory, and the reason why we say theory, animal fats, of course, would not have lasted for us to be able to test what's in what constitutes the actual eyeshadow itself
Mhm.
once it's created. We're just kind of thinking that it must have been animal fat or some kind of suet that was
Yeah.
used to then apply the the powder, the ground down powder to the eye.
Mhm. Yeah.
Water could have been used as well, and that of course would change the color and it would change the consistency. And
Mhm.
then if you use a very weak solution of gum and water, that was tacky enough to stick the pigment to the eye, but
Mhm.
also not change the consistency of the actual pigment itself too much, that it would look too chalky or too light, so it would change.
Yeah.
Obviously, you put a few layers on, so you can imagine. Well, I often do this kind of idea of men and women mixing their pigment with these weak solutions, and then are they putting them on layers? I'm going to wear light mint today, or I'm going to wear
Right?
darker turquoise today. And I think it's fantastic how we can, and obviously they were looking at it as a version of social status. They were looking at it
Yeah.
as a version of denoting who they were in society by wearing this makeup. Makeup is so important historically, and it is
Yeah.
such an important social marker historically. And now it's a form of expression, it's a form of
Mm,
identity, and
mm.
it's something that's very dear to my heart, and I think to a lot of people. So that's why we relate to it so much, and why I think the history of beauty and the history of makeup is so popular.
Yeah.
But of course, when you're looking at malachite and you're looking at the actual pigment itself, that those containers alongside your unguent or your ointment container,
Mhm.
your hairpin and your comb, that
Mhm.
would have made up then the ancient Egyptian toilet set. The way you would still have your toiletries and your
Your
little
little toiletry bag. Oh my
yeah.
gosh. That
But
is
obviously theirs is made
incredible.
of bone and ivory, their
Yeah.
container. But
And ivory is illegal now, so I just have my bone hairpin now.
yeah.
That
But
is so fascinating.
if you do want a little weird tangent that you probably won't keep in, and it's completely fine,
No, that's
the
fine. This is for us
the,
now.
the pallets themselves were actually excavated in 1905, the ones that I saw
Yeah.
in the Museo Egizio, by Ernesto Schiaparelli, who his cousin is Celestino Schiaparelli, whose daughter was Elsa Schiaparelli. So just even growing up, you can imagine in that household with so
Yeah.
many academics around you into astronomy, having a distant cousin who was excavating these cosmetic palettes. I don't know if it had any kind of effect on Elsa, but it's just great to see that connection between them all. But he was a very famous Egyptologist who just
Yeah.
happens to be related to my favorite fashion designer. So I'm even happier now. There's a little link there.
Yes, see, they all connect together.
Mhm.
History, fashion, it's everything in your life, Flora, is telling you that it all connects and your job is valid and important.
I feel validated by you. Thank you.
I'm so glad. My mission is that everybody feels validated when they leave an episode.
I'm having a great time. So
I'm so glad. So, to finish us out for our episode today, I would love to know if there's any little factoid, anything you'd love to leave our listeners with today for the end of the episode.
I think off the top of my head, I mean, when you're looking at the history of crystals, any other little factoid I do want to leave you with is the level of personal connection to
Mm,
these crystals was quite interesting.
mhm,
Again, if you're looking at art history, a very famous art historical writer called Giorgio Vasari, even he has some lore around him when it comes
mm,
to the curative properties of gemstones. Apparently, he fainted from a seizure while he was hanging a painting in a church in Rome, and the artist next to him had a bloodstone in his pocket. And when apparently Vasari was hemorrhaging, and he used the bloodstone to stop the hemorrhage. But when he would take the bloodstone, which is like a heliotrope of a you can still buy them in crystal shops today. But when he took it away, apparently the bleeding started again. So even people who were seen as academics, they were also using gemstones, and they were also employing them or writing about them. And even Robert Boyle, who's considered the father of chemistry in Ireland,
mhm,
he was a bit skeptical of the owl bloodstone. He was a bit like, I don't
mhm.
know. But he actually wrote, I mean, he's probably known as the father of modern chemistry, and he wrote an essay about the origin and virtues of gems themselves. So he was
Wow.
even quite interested in it. So even towards the 17th and 18th century, it doesn't just stop at the 16th century. This interest in curative properties of gemstones continues. Now, he's not really convinced too much. He wants to employ other forms of modern medicine. But as I mentioned throughout the show, there is a huge resurgence now in the use of precious stones. And there are some companies which are dedicated to crystal infused skincare.
Yeah.
You know, rubies are very good for they're strong stimulators of the skin. They're good regulators of blood circulation. They've got toning effects, anti-aging products.
Yeah.
According to these companies and according, cosmetic.
Yeah.
You know, if you're going to look at any kind of anti-aging products, I mean, drink more water. I don't know.
Yeah.
Is there a foolproof way of stopping it? Now, obviously, rubbing gemstones on yourself isn't going to do anything. It is crushed powders within skincare, but there's even whole companies like Gemology Cosmetics. They look at, they have gems infused into their skincare all over the world, particularly because it's to do with toning, soothing, rejuvenating skin. You'll find it. And the likes of like Charlotte Tilbury products, they have a lot of ruby powder and amethyst powder.
What? Charlotte Tilbury has ruby and amethyst powder in it?
Yeah, the magic serum has ruby in it. Has crushed ruby powder in it.
Wow.
Yeah. That's why you feel so beautiful after you wear it. You're like,
and why it's so freaking expensive.
I actually have her lipstick on today.
Oh my gosh.
You could send us to the Met.
Yeah. Charlotte, if you're listening, like I know you are, if you could just, that would be great. Or put us on your PR list. Either way.
I'm obsessed with her. I just think she is fun. Imagine getting ready with her on a night out. You look amazing, darling. I'm like, oh my god, thank you so much. I think she's great. I love her.
I would literally die.
Just come out with us for a drink. You don't have to even just come out with us.
Just hang out with the Charlotte, Pat McGrath. Literally anybody. Oh my gosh, Laura. Thank you so much for just spreading so much joy and information on the podcast today. I really appreciate you. And if you just there we go. Okay. And I'm sure people are going to want to find you in other places. So tell all of these delicious little donuts where they can find you.
So you can find me on Instagram and TikTok mainly at Seek the Historic, hanging out with all of the kids trying to figure out how to use TikTok, but at Seek the Historic is where you'll find me on pretty much all platforms. I have a brand new series starting now on the art of fashion, how fashion art have always collaborated. But you can also find me on LinkedIn as well. I have all my podcasts there. You just type in my name, you'll find it. But Seek the Historic should bring up everything. It'll bring you to my website, and that will bring you to everything else.
Awesome. And all of that information will, of course, be in the show notes for you. Please go check out all of Laura's wonderful content that she has. She works so hard, does so much research, and let's show her a little bit of For the Love of History love. And with that, that's our episode today. Thank you so much for joining us, Laura.
Thank you so much for having me. I've had a blast. Thank you.
And I will see you in the outro. Okay, bye. Once again, thank you so much, Laura, for coming on and sharing your incredibly extensive knowledge on gems with us. I really, really appreciate it, and I thoroughly enjoyed learning all of these weird facts, and I hope you enjoyed learning all of these weird facts too, my delicious little donut. And if you did, consider leaving a rating and / or a review. There was an influx of reviews. We got like 10. And I'm so happy we're like reaching, I don't know, we're verbing closer to our goal of 200 reviews by the end of the year. I'm so excited about it. Thank you for your help with that. It really helps the algorithm let other people know that For the Love of History is a podcast that other people should like and know about, and it recommends For the Love of History to more people. And it is now come to the time where we talk about the announcement that I mentioned at the beginning of the episode. I'm so excited about this, and this is a really big dream of mine. So we have an opportunity to create the first ever app that goes with a history podcast. Now, what the heck are you talking about, TK? So we have an opportunity. One of the delicious donuts in the community is an app game designer. And we came up with the idea of having an app, a game that goes with For the Love of History podcast and each episode. So basically what would happen is every Friday when the episode comes out, a new series of quiz questions and game-style quests would come out that are related to the episode. And if you answer the questions correctly, then you get history points. It's a great way to engage with the episode, to kind of review what you listened to, and just have a super fun time with history. And during the week, we would also have little side quests like hydration check-ins, where you take a picture of your beverage that you are currently sipping on, and then you would also get history points. We would also be hosting occasional scavenger hunts where you would go outside, take pictures of different historical things around you. Lots of different history style questies that we would have, which would again then lead to history points. And these history points would lead to merch discounts or special bonus episodes, exclusive content, and so much more. This would be the very first app of its kind. To my knowledge, there is no other history podcast that has an accompanying game app that goes with it. So we could be making history with this app. So where do you come in? Well, creating an app is a little bit expensive. And by a little bit, I mean a lot. So we need your help to get the ball rolling. There is a fundraiser page that will be in the show notes, and the donors who help get this app up and running will be the first to beta test the app, which is so cool and so exciting. And they will also get lots of extra goodies when the app is up and running. So if you are able to donate, I would really appreciate that to help this super cool goal come true, and any little bit helps. But if you can't, that's also totally fine. No pressure at all. I'm just happy you're here. So that's the big announcement. That's the big news. That's a thing that I'm super excited about. So once again, if you would like to help get the ball rolling on the For the Love of History game app, then you can check for all the information about it in the show notes below. And that's all I got for you, friend. That's it. That's the big announcement that I'm very excited about, and I hope that you're excited about it too. So with that, I will tell you adieu and drink your water. Go outside, do something that makes you happy this week. Have a little treat, a little snacky snack. Get your little cute raccoon hands on some goodies. And I will see you next week for our second to last episode of this season, The First Princess. Ooh, what could be that about? What could that be about? Okay, I'm gonna go. I love you. Bye.